Yeah, obviously. Okay, you guys can all see my screen? All right, so I hope everyone, read the article. I think it was pretty an easy read. It was short, concise. I think one thing that I kind of wanted to point out, remember that this is a review article, right? And again, you guys have a little bit of experience with journal articles because of being in other biology classes. But it's really nice to start with a review article, okay? Because you can then, if, anything that you're reading about in here, you could then go and look at that citation of the paper that they're citing, right? To get some more information about it. So that's why it's nice to start with a review, because then it gives you a place to go next, rather than having to go back to PubMed and just search sort of blindly. Okay, so I do like a review article first. So like for your projects, again, I told you, actually your next journal, I'm going to do one more journal article assignment that's going to be related to, well, we didn't do an assignment for this, but the next one will still be COVID related, and particularly related to genetics and COVID, since that goes along with what we covered in chapter 2. But then the next one, you'll probably be choosing an article that's related to the topic that you think you're going to do for your project. Okay, so we'll have to start next week talking a little bit about the project. And it's going to be a poster, right? You're going to choose a disease, a disease that we really didn't cover thoroughly in class. And then you're going to be finding articles kind of about that. Okay, so I'll give you more information about the project, specifically what we need to do for that, but just kind of a heads up. All right, so first things first, why doesn't somebody, overall impressions of this review article? Again, it was short, right? It's not going to give you that much of a, detailed information, but what do you think about the article, or did you learn something that you didn't know before after reading it? Somebody tell me something they learned, I guess, or something they thought was interesting from it.
I actually thought the date was pretty interesting, the March 2nd, since I thought it was before. So like when I read that it was March 2nd, I mean.
Well, they're saying that this was written on, as of March 2nd, they're giving you the data up to that point, right?
Oh, I thought what was interesting was that there's like alpha, beta, gamma, and delta coronavirus. I didn't hear about that before.
Yeah, I mean, if you kind of just look at the introduction, again, this is short, you could definitely read a lot more information about the actual virus itself, right? I wrote down some notes about that, right? It's a large family of viruses. So the coronaviruses have been around, that family for a long time, right? It's not that they just came around, in 2019. They're single-stranded RNA viruses. So what does that mean? I'll ask you guys that because you guys are biology majors. What do we mean when we say it's a single-stranded RNA virus? Or it's an RNA virus? Because RNA is single-stranded anyway. What does that mean?
That means that it's like genetic material is RNA. Like that's what it has inside the protein like capsule thing.
Okay, good. Yeah, the virus itself, right? Its genetic information is in the form of RNA. All right, and then what happens like when it encounters its host cell? Somebody else. I think somebody else was starting to kind of say something before that. Who was that? I don't know. What do you think? What do you
say something about like reverse transcriptase?
Okay, so if it had reverse transcriptase, we would call it a retrovirus. So not all RNA viruses are retroviruses, right? So, but that's a good point to bring up, because it's actually not that you would think that, right? But it can just get its RNA into the cell, and then the host cell can start making proteins from that RNA, right? Without having to reverse transcribe it back into DNA. But yeah, that's true. There are RNA viruses that are retroviruses that can do that because they carry that enzyme with them. All right, and then yeah, Blossom, you pointed out that there's a bunch of different families of them, and then it says here to date there have been 6 human coronaviruses identified, right? So, and if you wanted to learn more about that, right, you can click on this link here and learn more about those types that were identified, right? And then even from that paper, you might be able to get even more information in terms of finding maybe the original article, written by those researchers that discovered each one, right? So that's why I like starting with a review article, because it really gets you, kind of points you in the right direction in terms of where to find that primary information, okay? So I think I'm going to ask you this, but I'll ask it now. It's one of the discussion questions, or the questions that are on the question and answer forum. How does the information presented here compare to what you've heard on the news? And so kind of going along with that, I guess, why is it important to read primary literature like this rather than listening or finding out your information from secondary or tertiary sources? Somebody who didn't say anything, what do you think?
I guess I feel like the information is like a lot more specific and doesn't feel as generalized. Usually when I read it from another source.
Okay, that's true. Yeah.
It's more
What-
reliable.
Who's that? Babby?
Yeah, me.
Say it again.
It's more reliable.
Yeah, good. But, and that's a good point. You still have to be kind of careful, you know, like if, as long as you're reading from like peer-reviewed journals, like we are pulling from, then yeah, that information before it's published has to be reviewed by other scientists, by other clinicians. It doesn't just get sent out there and not anyone can just write it, right? So yeah, more reliable, right? If you're talking about something on the news, you could say whatever, right? And you don't really know where their sources are from. Here again, if you read this article, it cites where they got their information from. So if you have a question about it, you go back and look at that source. Now, there's definitely a possibility that somebody might write something and then it's not really, you know, backed up by science, right? And if you go look at that source, it's not really a good source. But for the most part, if you're reading a peer-reviewed article, it's gone through a review process. And people have checked those sources and things like that, right? So yes, more reliable. What else? What do you think?
It doesn't have like a high fatality rate compared to other human coronaviruses.
What, which virus? Where'd you find that from?
I don't have the article pulled up. I had it written down. Hold on.
Meaning that this strain, this SARS-CoV-2?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's one point in the article where they talk about a little bit about, yeah, like comparing it.
Yeah.
Isn't that as of March 2nd? So I think things changed since March 2nd. So it's higher now.
Yeah, perhaps. Exactly. And the other thing is, but this is all good points to bring up. The other thing is too, remember, they're just looking at the cases that were in China, right? And sort of a subset. And so whenever we're reading these articles, you got to remember it in terms of where they're pulling their data from, right? How they obtain their data, and yeah, kind of check what date you're talking about. But yeah, it's true. But I think to Katie's point, I feel like when I was reading it too, that sort of stood out a little bit to me, that the rate was lower. And what about, you know, they keep mentioning 2003, right? So apparently there was an outbreak of this SARS-CoV virus in 2003. That's why they're calling this one SARS-CoV-2, okay? Again, like we think that this is so new. It's not so new, okay? So here's another kind of question. I won't ask that one, I guess. And I think I kind of may ask something like this. Yeah, I won't ask you the one I asked in the discussion. But I just kind of mentioned this, right? That there was one in 2003, now there's one in 2019. Well, how do new coronaviruses emerge, right? Why are there different, or how does that happen? If you think about biologically, how does that happen? How would you explain that to your non-science friend, right? They might be like, well, how's that possible? Go ahead, who is that?
Oh, recombination.
What do you mean by that?
So basically like that the virus again mutates and then it gets like to a different form. And then, so like, even though they know that it's like the same kind of similar, well, there's different strands. So it's like, even though it's a general virus, like different strands that generate.
Yeah, different strains, they're genetically different and they may not be that different, right? They're still part of that same family, but genetically, right, mutations can occur, right? We talk about, I think I asked you this in Bio 111, like with, in terms of like with bacteria, right? Like how do you explain sort of antibiotic or think about evolution in terms of antibiotic resistant bacteria? Well, think about it the same way. If you think about viruses and how virulent they might be or how disease causing they might be, right? How does evolution and natural selection sort of explain that? It's the same idea, right? They mutate, and then there's some mutation that makes them, better able to infect a cell, right? And then cause disease. And so then they're able to increase it. Although viruses is a little bit weird, right? Because they're not really living things.
Oh, but also I was going to say is I think the thing is that it's not super virulent, that it's like it kills the host completely sometimes, but it's like just in the middle sometimes where it is enough to like keep on infecting because it doesn't kill every host right away.
Right, because then it'll end up destroying itself too. But again, remember, viruses are not living, right? Super, super weird, right? I don't think anyone, it's one of those things in science where it's like so hard to kind of explain, like what actually is it, right? And obviously you can't treat with any really medication specifically. So it's tough. Viruses are tough. But kind of think about, and I ask you these discussion questions after, but think about the role of genetics in studying viruses particularly, right? In general. Okay, we talked about kind of like the genetics of the virus itself, right? You can, and actually, I'll pull this up, okay, because this is kind of interesting, I think, and it kind of shows you. So if you look at this section here where it talks about the host and the reservoir and talks about kind of, what role animal hosts might play in transmission. I ask you, I think, something about that in the discussion question. But like, it's interesting. And so like I think it cites one of the studies where they actually found that there's a 96%, here, right? Recent research has found that the virus, okay, the COVID-19, whatever you want to call it, is 96% identical at the whole genome level to a bat coronavirus. Right? It says, which means that bats are the most possible host. So now you could go click this article here and find that original article that made that claim and look at the actual research. Because remember, the review is just citing or summarizing, okay? And so if you look here, this is that paper, okay? And actually I believe it was published in Nature. Wait, I think it was. Yeah, I believe it was published in Nature, right? So, so that's just kind of, again, I wanted to show you guys that to show you how useful the review actually is, okay? And you know what? You might want to take a look at this article. I think it's kind of interesting. There's definitely a lot of, there's probably some data that's hard to interpret, on your level, but regardless, it's pretty interesting, right? And again, it's kind of providing evidence as, to say that perhaps that it originated from bats, right? But then I think they also talk about some multiple other hosts that might be necessary in sort of transmitting the virus, okay? So it's another thing to think about, right? The transmission of viruses between different species, okay? And a lot of time, and so there's some mutation that occurs that enables it to then transmit to humans or what have you. But anyway, that's kind of something to think about. And again, to kind of think about the role of genetics in, again, studying viruses, okay? The next paper that I'm going to have you read, I told you, is about genetics. It's not about the genetics of the virus. That one's more about like, all right, what might make you, your sort of genetics, what might make you more susceptible to developing a more serious case of COVID, okay? So there's a paper that kind of, studies some things that might potentially be involved in that. Right? So again, our chapters on genetics, let's kind of think about how we can apply genetics to this. And so, like I said, our sort of theme through the semester is to try to use COVID related articles, to kind of sort of amplify what we're learning about in our chapters. All right. Let me see if there's one other. I don't know. I think that's kind of most of the points that I wanted to make from this. And like I said, there are 3 discussion questions that you guys need to answer after the fact. I don't know. What else? What are some other things you learned? Somebody else, again, who hasn't said anything. What's something else you learned from this article? Hopefully you could take away one thing.
Well, I said something before, but like just really quickly, I thought it was interesting how from like March, like they knew that the disease, it was like asymptomatic and symptomatic, because it said that symptoms range from no symptoms at all to severe pneumonia and death. But it's like we didn't really start finding that out until like later, right? Yeah. So I just thought that was kind of interesting.
Well, and they knew that before March, right? I mean, they're reporting on this in March, but they obviously knew this probably come, January or whatever, right? Or December or something like that. Because again, this is sort of a review of what was happening, earlier on. Yeah, I mean, as you kind of read some of this stuff, you can kind of think about all the things that went on here, and but there's still so much that we don't know. And again, viruses are really hard to study, and so that complicates things as well. So I guess, I don't know. Anything else anyone else wants to add? What about the symptoms? Were you surprised by what they listed as the symptoms? Or that's kind of like, if even before you read this, if you had to list symptoms, would you have pretty much listed those same symptoms? What do you think?
Yeah, hardness in the breathing.
Say it again, Chrisanta.
Hardness in the breathing.
Yeah, what? Shortness of breath.
Mm-hmm.
What's the medical term for that?
Mm.
Uh-oh. Look it up. What's the medical term for shortness of breath?
Shortness of breath. Shortness of breath.
Is it DICE? I don't know how to say it. Yeah, that right there that you just highlighted.
Yeah, correct. Right? That's the medical term. So you've probably, that term's everywhere when it's associated with COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing is too, still they say that fever is still one of the number one symptoms, although again, there's many patients with mild symptoms that probably never developed a fever. And like a lot of places will take your temperature and stuff like that. So based on what they say here, that still is one of the main symptoms. Anyway, so I hope you guys, learned a little bit from this. And again, just a reminder that, we as science students or scientists or clinicians should be going to the primary literature, okay? And if you hear something on the news, go and search for it in the primary literature. There's actually something that we'll probably read about maybe next couple articles, or I'll bring it up, that has to do with the virus and the ACE receptor. I don't know if anyone's ever kind of heard about that, but it's just random because some guy at soccer, one of the soccer dads was like, oh, did you, like, he didn't know like what I do or whatever. And he's like, oh, I heard that the reason why children don't really get it is because their cells don't have that receptor, and that's how the virus is accessing the cells or whatever. And I was like, oh, so then I looked up a little bit more about it, right? So in fact, I think, and so anyway, like I said, I'll give that to you. We'll definitely read about that because I think it's pretty interesting. Oh no, I don't have it here. That's your next thing. All right, I have it somewhere. Oh, here, I'll show you. So it's right here, right? So I found an article. There's other ones related to it as well, but that's super small. So let me just since I said it, let me show you. Go away. Thanks. Right, so it's this ACE2 receptor, right? So angiotensin converting enzyme 2. Oh, that's an enzyme. I got to read about that more. But anyway, it has to do with this as being a potential sort of target, right? So obviously the receptor must be related to this in some way. Like I said, I didn't read it fully yet, but I know there's some data out there that links this. Okay, so again, if you hear stuff like that, go to the primary literature. And actually read about it for yourself, okay? All right, so just so you know, I just mentioned this as well. This will be the next article that I assign, and I will make an assignment for this this time. So like I said, your assignment for this review article is just to answer my 3 discussion questions, and I'll show you that on Moodle in a second. Again, hopefully Moodle is behaving a little bit better. I'll show you what I mean. But our next paper will be this, because again, it relates to the chapter, and now it's not talking about the genetics of the virus, it's talking about the genetics of the host, right? And how that might make you more susceptible, okay? So that'll be next. I'll put that up, like I said, an assignment that goes along with it. All right, other questions, comments, anything? Okay, so if you go to the top of the Moodle page, which you guys see here, there's a question and answer forum, Okay, we should try to be using this too if we have questions about anything sort of related to content. I added 2 questions, or 2, hello. There's 3, 1, 2, and 3. 1, I don't know why they're out of order like that. Anyway, oh, somebody replied already. So everyone should be able to see replies. I may have to change the setup a little bit, but I'll figure that out in terms of which way to view it is best, because there's like blog-like and all these different types of setup. But so there's a question here. You guys are going to hit reply and reply to my question. So everyone should submit their own reply. There is a 30-minute lag in terms of, I think well, maybe that's just in the email. Regardless, there's some sort of 30-minute lag. I don't know if that 30-minute lag is just in terms of notifying via email that it's there or what have you. So don't worry about it. That's for me to change the settings. Just reply to those 3 questions. Okay, guys? And you can see here that turn it in is enabled, meaning it's going to check for plagiarism against other discussion replies and also internet sources. So this is in your own words, right? I don't know, 3 sentences or so to kind of answer it, 2 or 3 sentences, maybe a little more if you want, but you know, not like 2 words. Okay. Questions about that, guys?
It's on the article we were just reviewing, right?
Correct. Yep. Yeah, the review article, the one that we just, yep. And remember that that is also posted. It's still slow, huh?
When should we do it by?
By the end of the day today. So remember, you got to go do your chapter 1 quiz and then post the answers to those 3 discussion questions by the end of today, 11:59 p.m. Okay, so no, maybe not today, by the end of tonight. All right. All right, let me just see if there's anything else. So remember, here's the review article. It's here. I just want to show you it was there as well. Quiz, and then chapter 2 is up. Like I said, I think this one's like 45 minutes and this is like an hour long. So it's a lot. If you haven't listened to it, which maybe you guys haven't, listen to that chapter 2 recorded lecture ahead of class on Wednesday so that we can review it more on Wednesday. And then, like I said, I will be putting chapter 3 up as well. Chapter 3 is not going to require as much review, okay? Because I think it's pretty straightforward. Does anyone have any questions about chapter 2 right now? No? All right, so make sure you listen to that. There will be a quiz on chapter 2 and 3 together. So I'll probably have you guys do that on Monday, or I'll have it due by Monday, but I'll remind you guys of that. Okay, so I don't think it's available yet anyway. And then, oh, there's also a case study on chapter 2. That was the other thing I wanted to mention. So if you click on the assignment like I'm doing, it will eventually go, okay? There is in that folder where it says case studies, all of the case studies for the chapters are there. I just chose one, so you guys can take a look at all of them, and then if you have questions about it, let me know. But I just chose one. So this is the case study on Bianca Vasquez, and I put it here. So this is just the case study PowerPoint slides for that. You can just click on that and answer questions 1 through 4 and submit it, okay? So that's due by Wednesday, due by class time on Wednesday. All right, guys?
Can you just repeat what we're supposed to do with this? Just answer questions?
You'll see the questions are in here. So it says it right there in the instructions. Just answer questions 1 through 4, put it in a Word document, and then upload it. I'll show you. It's pretty self-explanatory once you open the PowerPoint. They're here, okay? So there's questions right within. All right? Any other questions about that, guys? All right, so we'll review that. And then again, any other questions for chapter 2, I can go over. What happened now? Let me go back. Oh, no, I probably just closed it. I don't know what I just did. All right, here we go. I didn't close it. Okay, so by the end of the day, you got to answer those 3 discussion questions, do the chapter 1 quiz, okay? And then, you know, for the chapter 1 quiz, if people have questions, you know, let me know. We can go over that. And then by Wednesday, complete the chapter 2 case study. Make sure you listen to the recorded lectures by Wednesday. Ask any questions. I can review whatever we need to review. And that's pretty much, I guess, it for what we need to do in the next, couple days. Let me just see if there was one other thing I just kind of popped into my mind, but I forget. Maybe not. I forget what it was. I don't know. Anyone have any questions? Oh, I know what it was. Let me show you. I don't know if I put that up. The other thing is, I was just thinking of this because one of the students in my other class asked about this. So in terms of the exam, the way that they're set up is that those questions are really like scenario type questions, and they're supposed to be questions that like you would find on the NCLEX and likely find on other types of exams like that. It's not just gonna be, like the quiz questions that are kind of like, oh, which one is a non-modifiable risk factor or whatever. It's not gonna be straightforward like that. They're going to be questions that test your understanding. And like I said, that's true for any kind of licensing exam, whether it's for clinical lab science, whether it's for anything. It's going to be more applied knowledge, put yourself in a scenario, what does this tell you kind of questions. So with that said, if you bought the textbook and had access to like the e-version of it, and the MyLab and the resources there are practice questions there, okay? Also, in the textbook, because again, and I'll probably do some of these questions with you, but I just wanted to make sure I mentioned this to you guys. In the textbook, if you look at the end of the chapter, there are review questions, okay? And so like I said, I'll probably end up posting these somehow or whatever. I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I will get them out there in some way. But there's review questions there, and those review questions at the end of the chapter are similar to how the exam questions are worded, okay? So again, I want to just kind of make you aware that the way the questions are going to be asked aren't going to just be these super straightforward questions. And then I will have essay questions on there as well. So it's the end of the chapter review, and then the answers to those questions are actually in the back of the book, to the review questions. But then there are additional questions through the textbook as well online. All right. So I just wanted to mention that. All right, guys. So are there any other, since we weren't able to do the quiz, I'll let you guys do that on your own. If you have questions about it, please let me know. But I think they're pretty straightforward and self-explanatory. It'll show you what the correct answer was after you finish and what your grade is right away. Questions, comments, concerns, anything? No? All right, then I'm gonna end now because like I said, you guys gotta go do those discussion questions. You gotta go do the quiz. So let me give you guys got to go listen to the chapter 2 lecture. So you might want to start that if you haven't already. Take the time to do whatever you need to do. All right, guys?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right, guys.
Sounds good.
I'll stay on if anyone.
Bye, Dr. C.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Bye. If anyone has questions, I'll stay on.